In this video, you will be building this Pokedex web app using Svelte.js. Svelte.js is the most loved JavaScript framework according to the Stack Overflow Developer Survey 2021. Here are some of the prerequisites for following along. Some basic knowledge of JavaScript, including promises and fetch API, Node.js installed, and a code editor. I'll be using VS Code. Open terminal in the folder you want to create the project in. Run npm init vite at latest. Give a name to your project and select Svelte. And once that's done, cd into your project folder and open it in your code editor. Now open up your integrated terminal and run npm install. Once that's done, run this command to install Tailwind, PostCSS and Autoprefixer. Now run npx tailwind css init-p. This will create two files, Tailwind config and PostCSS config. Go to Tailwind config and add this path in content. Tailwind will look in these files for its classes. Now create global.css in source folder and add Tailwind's derivatives. Then import it in your app.svelte. Run npm run dev to start the local server. Now if you go to localhost 3000, it should look something like this. But we don't need all that, so let's clean the codebase a bit. Great job! You successfully succeeded at coding your brain.
Because it's empty.
Get it? Anyways, let's start actually building the Pokedex. Components in Svelte are divided into three sections. Script, which is your logic, markup, which is the UI, and style, which contains your CSS. We'll need Svelte Navigator to handle the routing, so let's go ahead and install that. Declare a router and then we'll add our navbar, which we are gonna create now. Head over to lib and create navbar.svelte. This is where we're gonna store our components. But I know a lot of you are gonna go wild if I don't name the folder components. So let's do that. Write markup for navbar. Make a flexbox. Center children. Give some border radius and shadow. Give it some padding and use width full so that it doesn't collapse on children. We'll use Zinc 800 for background because it looks dope. Now add a script tag to import link from Svelte Navigator. Then use the link component which will navigate us to homepage. That's all for navbar. Now let's head over to app.svelte and import it. Let's give our homepage some styling. We'll use flexbox with column direction, center the children and give it some padding. Looking good. Now let's discuss the overview of how the flow of our homepage is going to be like. We have our navbar at the top with a link that navigates us to the homepage. We will have two buttons, previous and next, which will be responsible for changing the page. Then we have our PokemonGrid, which will list 20 Pokemons per page. It will take offset as prop. If you know what pagination and offset mean in terms of API, you can skip to this timestamp. But if you don't, stick with me for a while. The process of separating content into pages is known as pagination. In our case, showing 20 Pokemons per page is pagination. That means we need to fetch 20 Pokemons every page. Poke API has the default limit of 20, so we don't need to change that. Offset in simple terms means the position in the list of Pokemons from which you want to get the 20 Pokemons. So if we set the offset to 0, it will return the Pokemons from the 0th position. It will return the first 20 Pokemons. Similarly, if we set the offset to 20, it will return the 20 Pokemons after the first 20 Pokemons. So if the last Pokemon in our first page was Charmander, it will return 20 Pokemons after Charmander. So now it is clear to us that in order to change the page, we need to either increase the offset by 20 to get to the next page or decrease the offset by 20 to go back to the previous page. Let's declare a variable offset and give it a value of 0. We'll define two functions, one to increase the offset by 20 and other to decrease it. Then we'll create a route which will serve our home page. Let's actually create a reusable button component to handle the change in offset. Give it a background and text color, some padding and margin, shadow and border radius. Inside, we'll put a slot. The children you put inside any component are called slots in Svelte. Just like HTML tags have events, we can also create events for our components. To do that, import create event dispatcher from Svelte. Declare a variable dispatch, which is a function that takes an event name. When this button is clicked, we want our button component to dispatch an event change offset. Let's head back to app.svelte and make a container for the two buttons. We'll use flexbox row, center the children, and fit content. First, we want to check if the offset is 0, because if it is, we wouldn't want to decrease it any further. We can do this with Svelte's if block. Then we can pass in a function to the event change offset. Same for increasing the offset. Now let's create the PokemonGrid component. In Svelte, the exported variables are identified as props. A reactive statement in Svelte means a statement which will update whenever the states inside it change. In our case, fetch Pokemons will update whenever offset changes. You can do this by using $sign and then creating the function. We fetch the Poke API and use the offset prop in query param as explained earlier. Then we'll convert it into JSON and return the results. Svelte handles promises really well. We can use await then catch block in markup. Await block is rendered when the promise is pending, then block is rendered when a promise is fulfilled, and catch is rendered when the promise is rejected. We'll await the fetch Pokemon's function, write markup for when the data is being fetched. Inside our then block, you can call the response anything, we'll call it Pokemons. We'll make a grid of Pokemons and add some tailwind to make it responsive for other resolutions. Svelte also has each block, which lets you iterate over values. Let's iterate over Pokemons. We'll say each Pokemon as Pokemon like you would in a for in loop. Let's create and export a function to fetch data for a Pokemon. It will take the Pokemon's name as parameter and return the JSON response. Let's go back to PokemonGrid and inside our each block import and await our newly created function. Then we'll add a link to Pokemon's name and then design grid's children. That's all for the grid. Now go back to app and import it. You should see something like this if you go to localhost 3000 now. Let's make a dynamic route which will take Pokemon name as parameter and pass it on to Pokemon component as prop. You can do this by using let params in route, then you will have access to params object. Now let's create the Pokemon component. First declare name prop and import fetch Pokemon data. Create a column flex container and center the children. Use await then block to fetch Pokemon data, then use image sprite and name. Create a container for stats, just style it to your liking and use each block to iterate over different stats. For types, also create a container, loop over different types and get type.name. Lastly, go to index.html and set the title to something cool. Now let's deploy our Pokedex. Create a GitHub repository and push your code. Sign in to Vercel and choose hobby account. Click on new project and then import your GitHub repository.
That was Pokedex web app with Svelte. Like this video if you learned anything and subscribe for more such videos. My name is Earth and I'll see you in the next one.